All right. Everyone, all right, so this is welcome to the Atlanta FileMaker Developers Group. Today is July 3rd, 2019. Let's go around the room and we'll do our introductions.
I'm Kristen, Advantage.
Daniel with 7 Spring Solutions.
Jim Martin, 360 Works.
Sean
Kim, 360 Works.
Hey Dave, it's Junior from 360 Works.
Sorry about that. All right. And my name is David Nadel from Blue Feather. Our speaker today is Dave Ramsey, the creator of FMPerception. So Dave, go ahead and take it away, please.
Okay. Yeah, FMPerception. So let me share my screen here.
We'll probably ask you some questions as you're going here too, so heads up.
That is fantastic. Just making sure everything looks good. A quick question for you guys is, or you people, is there anybody in the room who is not an FMPerception user?
Yes, I'm not an FMPerception user.
Okay.
All of us, everyone here is not an FMPerception. Oh no, we do have a couple of FMPerception users.
I use it pretty regularly. I'd say like every other day.
Okay, fantastic. I was just trying to figure out exactly what portions of discussion I wanted to do. So, oh, that's weird. What are you seeing right now?
The timer, and it says current slide 1 of 45.
Okay, we're not going to do that.
Right.
Yeah, so FMPerception is published by Geist Interactive. They're a platinum level FBA member, but I'm the developer. I'm a multi-language programmer, and I'm just going to keep moving as quickly as possible through the early stuff. The point of FMPerception is to try and make developers, or get out of the way of developers and allow them to become better at what they do, to produce better quality code faster. And as far as I'm concerned, the greatest way to do that is to give you a dramatically increased awareness of what's going on in your system, how it works, and how everything connects. And the faster you can get that information, the easier it is to stay in the zone and in the flow of development. So FMPerception is by far the fastest tool for digging into your database and getting all the data you need to answer your question and get back to work. I'm actually going to do an import real quick. The system that I start with, just as a demo, is FM Starting Point. Not the smallest system, not the largest system, but it's a decent test of the performance of FMPerception. And it's also available to anybody, so you can reproduce these tests at home and do whatever you would like that way. So that's actually pretty much the end of the slides for a while. So here's FM Starting Point. And I'm going to go ahead, actually let me crack open this folder. This has a DDR that I already exported. And one of the things, if you look really closely right here, you can see that the icons on these XML files are actually the FMPerception logo. And the reason is because I've told the machine to open XML files in FMPerception rather than in something else. This gives us two advantages. One, I can open this DDR just by double-clicking this, because at that point, FMPerception is an opener for DDRs. Or, when you're doing an export of a DDR, I can go here and do XML, and you can leave on this checkbox that's normally really obnoxious when you're doing an XML export. So I can just say, create the DDR to that folder, replace all the stuff. Done. It's not only exported the DDR, but now it's been opened in FMPerception. That's all that FMPerception needed to get started. And so how does it do this? Well, in comparison with other tools that work with the DDR, FMPerception doesn't load everything at once. So if you're looking at Inspector Pro or base elements, the first thing that they do is a massive import of all the DDR data into the database so that when you go look for something, it's already there and the table is already populated. In FMPerception waits for you to tell it what you're interested in. Okay, and then it on the fly parses the DDR as necessary to answer your specific question. So if you're not looking for everything, if you've got just one particular question, you can open the DDR, ask the question, and then get back to work really, really quickly. So I can drill into, let me blow this up. I can drill into this file and say, what tables are there in the file? Now, when I click on this, that's when it's going to go get the data on all the tables in the file. Ready? Done. That's how long it took to parse that section of the XML. But it went a little further because it got things like the count of fields, or even looking in the relationship graph and get the count of table occurrences. This is about 300 queries into the DDR to answer all of these questions and populate this table, but it does it in about 1/10 of a second. So if I just want to, let's see, go into projects and fields, there's all the fields. Let me get the status field. There we go. Project status, drill into that. What layouts is it on? And here's a list of the 23 places that this field appears on layouts. So if all I'm doing is making sure that all of these have the appropriate drop-down list, I can scroll over here and go display type drop-down, and here's the value list. And so I can see it's interesting that not all of these are actually using the same value list. That might be something that I need to look into, or it might be valid for the design of my system. If I'm going to spend a lot of time here, I can actually do things that don't work in FileMaker-based systems, like reorder columns. We'll grab that one, and we'll come back over here and grab this one. And now I've kind of custom whipped up an interface for dealing with just my current task. But if that answers my question, and that's all I really needed to know to get back to work, boom, I'm back to what I'm doing. I'm not spending 15, 20 minutes waiting for an import to happen. And I'm also not using the DDR from a week ago and hoping that I didn't do anything that makes that data invalid, which is, in general, what you end up doing with other tools. So, yeah. And actually, it's so fast. Let's actually do that one more time. So I closed the DDR in FMPerception. I'm going to open it again. Done. Here, tables, projects, fields, status, on layouts, back to work. This is the activity cycle that FMPerception is optimized for. Not for being kind of a long-term reference platform, but for getting the answer quickly and going back to what you were doing. And so we've got kind of all of the usual suspects here. You can look at the tables, and as we saw, you can see the fields within the tables. But we can also look at just a flattened list of all the fields in the entire system. So if you wanted to say, show me all of my container fields. So let's just go here. No, that's actually not that one. Here, where'd it go? So there we go. There's all our binary container fields. Or here are all of the unstored calculations. All right, there we go. unstored calculations, things like that. Let's go here. There's also, if you've ever tried to export all the data from one system or import it into a new system, very often you need to identify all of the serialized fields in a system to make sure that serial numbers get reset. I know as a general rule of thumb, we do less of that now using UUIDs, but there's a specific query just to find you all of the serial values. And so this also has a column just for the next serial value. And if I wanted to take this and kind of turn it into a checklist to help run my migration, I can go File, Export Results to CSV, dump it out to the desktop. Nope, there. Drop this back on FileMaker. Thank you. And there's a database. Now I can start adding checkboxes, notes fields, whatever I need to do, and that next serial value is right there. So in FMPerception, anything that is displayed down here can be exported to a CSV in one mouse option, or actually a key command if you want. So let's just kind of run through some of these. Things like layouts and scripts have multiple ways of looking at them. So one way is you can kind of look at these things in the folder structure if you like using complex folder structures for organizing your layouts. So I can say, well, show me the mouse layouts and then accounts, and then here's those layouts. But if I want to, I can just see a list of all the layouts flattened. So here's the 222 layouts in the system. And I can look at things like the theme for all of the layouts right there in a column, or organize them by the number of objects on the layout. Here's a 660 object layout. That's a lot of stuff. I can drill into that, drill into the layout objects. Here's a list of all of those 660 objects. Let's say I wanted to take this layout and now we're going to make a WebDirect version of it. So the first thing I need to do is have not 660 objects on the layout, because that performance is going to be terrible. But one of the other things that causes a problem when you're doing that is the total number of overridden CSS properties. So basically, how far did we deviate from the styles and themes that were applied to these things? The more of those CSS properties there are, the slower that object renders in WebDirect. And so I can see right here, local CSS properties. These have lots and lots of overrides. And so it would probably be worthwhile for me to start taking a look at fields on this layout and to find some themes that would cover those. Apply those themes and then bring it right back into FMPerception and see how much of a difference I've made as far as reducing those CSS properties.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
I was just curious, how does a custom CSS property make its way onto an object? Is that like, are you changing like the font color from the layout? Or are you actually like modifying the CSS and the XML of the layout object?
So I'm not modifying anything. Basically, the way WebDirect and even the layout engine, but WebDirect in particular, renders an object is they'll apply the theme, then the particular style, and then they'll go through and make any adjustments that you made specifically to that object.
I see.
And so if you change the font size or the text alignment or bold a field, all of those things are overrides to the applied style. And so the more of those there are, the slower it is to render.
That's cool. I never really thought about that as a performance consideration, but that makes a lot of sense.
The more objects you have on the layout and the more of them that have overridden CSS, the slower that layout will render in WebDirect. So much like with layouts, we can do scripts and look at them in the folder structure if you just want to look at one particular folder worth of scripts. But I'll just look at all of them. And here's all the scripts in the system. So I can go through and say, here's the total step count. Here's active steps that excludes inactivated script steps. Here's inactive steps. Like here's a script that has 129 inactivated steps. Okay. There's probably some cleanup there that I should do. I can also do, let's go active steps. And so here, right here, this is a 122 line script with one comment. Maybe that's something that I should be looking at. When you look at scripts that call other scripts, here's scripts that call scripts in another file. Now notice this is a single file DDR, which means I know immediately that we're missing components of this whole system, whether intentional or not. Here are scripts that do perform script on server. And halt script is a very powerful script step, but it's kind of a nuke to your call chain. So I personally like keeping an eye on what scripts have the ability to crush everything. Here's a fun little pro tip piece. There's a column called Cyclomatic Complexity. What the heck is cyclomatic complexity? Cyclomatic complexity is an expression of, one way to look at it is the number of possible paths through a chunk of code. Okay, so if you have an if statement in your script, then the script can go true or false. If you've got a loop and there's an exit is an implicit if that has the ability to exit or not. And so one way of looking at this is the number of possible paths through the script. The other way of looking at this is actually closer to a count of the number of unit tests you would have to write to test every possible path through that script. I know developers who have a standard where no single script can exceed 4 or 5 in that number. These are incredibly complex scripts that do lots of different things, and that might become a maintenance issue for you.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to see the mirror sync scripts.
In some cases, you're not really worried about the scripts. It's individual steps and how they're being used. And so there's a flattened list of all the script steps. It takes a second because there's a lot of them, 20,000 of them.
I like this one, yeah.
And so, again, you can filter on these things, et cetera. There's even a column here for whether this is a plugin, this is a step surfaced by a plugin or not. So this one here is standard script steps. And what standard script steps does is it organizes all of those steps into bins by the particular step. So has anybody seen one of those old systems that came from back in the 2.1 era where they used a lot of copy and paste rather than set field?
Oh, painful, but yes, I've run into that.
Right now, this system has one copy script step. But if this said 3,428, I've got a better idea of what this system is doing and when it was written and what other kinds of cruft I might have to deal with when working with that system.
Actually, I was a little scared. The solution that I had that did have copy and paste in it was not a super old system. It was just a really bad developer.
Yeah, there's that. What was the one just recently? The new Windows script step got a go to layout function added to it. And so if you wanted to go through your system and find every single place that new window was used and see which of these you needed to apply some implicit or explicit go to layout, you could do that right in here. It was just drilling right in and gets you that answer. So when FileMaker adds a new function, a new script step, and you need to support it in one way or another, you can quickly find every single place in a system that uses that script step. You do the same for plugin script steps. I could have sworn this isn't that version of the system.
Are you expecting to see some plugin script steps?
I did see some function missing
Yeah.
script steps in what you were pulling up before.
Yeah, let me see if this is the one. Open a different one. Nope, still not there. Anyway, this would surface all of those. And one of the nice things is if you've ever tried to work with a system where it was written using a plugin, but the plugin isn't there anymore, FileMaker will just tell you that the function is missing. However, if you use a plugin script step, FileMaker exports in the DDR the unique identifier for that plugin. And so I contacted a bunch of the plugin developers and got the top 20 or 30 plugins documented in FMPerception. So even if the plugin is missing, if you use the plugin script step, I can tell you what plugin it was. So as a pro tip, I highly recommend if you're using plugins to use one plugin script step somewhere in the system. Because if you use the plugin script step, you've basically permanently documented the identity of that plugin, and you can quickly retrieve that information. In the same way we had standard script steps, we've got standard functions. And so these are all the FileMaker standard calculation functions and where they're being used. So I can see all the places where I did get current date. And here's calculation fields, and here's layout objects, and script steps, and that looks like it for this one. So standard functions, also really nice when FileMaker adds new functions. We've also got plugin functions. So much the same thing. So let's say you were using Troy file plugin to write to an external file, and you wanted to use FileMaker 18's function to do that, or FileMaker 18's script step to do that instead. You can quickly identify the places where one is being used and migrate to the other one, and then confirm that you've gotten rid of all of the uses of that particular function. Back to custom functions. Custom functions have a couple of fun things. You can see parameters and uses. So if you just want to drill in and find all the places where this particular function is being used, I can see these are the 15 objects that reference this particular FN phone function. But sometimes functions call each other. Have you ever migrated a function from one system to another, and the definition of the calculation of the custom function broke because it has a dependency that you weren't aware of? It comments out the whole definition, and now you've got a big nightmare. I can go into this one, and I can see that this function at param is part of the SQL Sugar collection of plugins or custom functions. It calls these functions, including itself, and it's called by these functions, of course, including itself. But what I'd really like to do is kind of figure out everything that has to move together to migrate at once. And that's the function family. So the function family spiders up and down the call chain from this particular function and finds all the functions that have to move as a unit for this family to continue working. And so these are those. Now, in a perfect world, what I'd like to do is grab those 4 functions and move them into my FileMaker system. And with FMPerception, I can just right-click on these 4 selected objects and say copy for FileMaker. So I copy those for FileMaker. Where did that? Slight slip. Recent. Okay. File, manage, custom functions, paste. All 4 of them come in, and we drill in, and the function itself is not commented out.
Cool. Magic.
So all of those went happy. This works with anything that FileMaker can copy and paste. So tables, fields, scripts, script steps, layout objects, custom functions, value lists, privilege set. It's the custom menus, menu sets, and menu items. All of those items can be copied out of any existing DDR that you've got. And so in a lot of cases, opening a DDR in FMPerception is faster than actually opening the live system to copy those things out. Let's see here. Global variables. So this is every global variable referenced in your entire system, including the number of times that it is referenced. So if you change the functionality of a global variable, or if it needs to do something different, you can quickly find every single place. Now, global variables are not case sensitive in FileMaker, but that doesn't mean that case variant isn't annoying to look at and periodically confusing. And so as kind of a validation thing, I included a function that tells you if any of those global variables are referenced with different uppercase and lowercase. So you can look at this and go, yes, so somebody missed that one 4 times, and somebody, uppercase E, yeah, we should go in and fix that. Let's see here, relationships. So here's a fun one. So relationships don't technically have a name, but I provided them a name by using the 2 table occurrences. And if we scroll over, one of the things that we can find, here's all the self-joins. So basically 2 table occurrences from the same table connected together. And here's an indicator for which ones of these are broken. Now, if I look at this particular one, what I can see is this is a relationship to an external file where the file isn't there anymore. You can see that as well right here. And so the external file was missing when the DDR was exported. And so we don't have any data about that. And we're going to assume that that one's dead until you tell us otherwise.
This is weird because it's also a self-join, but it's from an external file.
They self-joined the same external table using table occurrences.
Right.
Now, that's the red ones indicate something that's broken. If you also had something where a field that was used in the relationship is now missing, it would flag in this way as well. Now, I don't know if on your screen you can see it, but there's this little yellow caution symbol. And in relationships, that tells you when the field types on a set of keys are not the same type. Sometimes they can cause weird behavior. Okay, so I can actually drill in here. So it's ID constant and status. I drill in, show me the sub-elements. ID constant is a calculated number, and status is a normal text field. Again, maybe that's fine. I just flag it as a caution. But there are behavior things that can pop up when you're doing that if you're not aware of when and where it's happening, particularly as a field type changes after the relationship was created.
Yeah, I definitely had to learn that the hard way. That caused a lot of problems for us.
That is kind of the life of the developer, is learning things the hard way.
Right.
Now, because of multi-predicate relationships, just looking at the relationship won't necessarily tell you everything you need. So in some cases, you need to look at each individual predicate. And so if you want to see, okay, how many fields are using, or how many relationships are using not equals anywhere in their conditions? Where these greater thans and less thans can be huge performance hits if you're not keeping an eye on it. And so being able to quickly identify which relationships do that is kind of what this is for. I'm burning time a little fast. Let me jump in here. Value lists are organized kind of by type. So whether they are custom values, field references, or external lists. And so, well, this one doesn't have any external lists, but these are the ones that are doing it through fields. And these have statically defined values. File access themes. So you're getting ready to work on that WebDirect thing, and you're thinking, I think the right answer is to make a new theme just for WebDirect. And then I can apply that theme to the appropriate layouts, and then I can apply styles to the particular objects. And so one of the things that I want to be able to see is, for example, here, this Enlightened Touch has 55 custom styles. It's not used on any layouts. How about this one, Enlightened? We're generally pretty consistent here about using our particular themes that we created, but we've got 10 layouts that are using this Tranquil Touch theme, and 3 layouts that are just using the standard Enlightened. We can also see here, for example, this minimalist mouse, 91 layouts. There are 4,272 objects that have a style applied and didn't then override anything. I think that's what it is. No, that's the default style on the theme. And these 2,635 objects have specific substyles applied. So if you wanted to change a particular thing, let's go look at those custom styles. Here's the number of layout objects that have it. And so if I was going to restyle this portal button and I wanted to know what was going to be affected, drill in, and that's referenced on these 2 layout objects.
Wow, that's so cool.
I can click on these, and over here in the sidebar, one thing that is always available is this hierarchy block. And the hierarchy block walks you through exactly how to get to this object. It's in this file, in the layouts, in this folder, this layout. There's a tab object, and then this tells you basically where that layout object is. So here's that particular tab panel in a portal, this button. And if you want the coordinates, it's in the general lower left of the screen. This region section breaks the layout, every layout, up into 9 regions, like a tic-tac-toe board. And also has a 10th region, which is off-screen right. So you can look at something and go, oh yeah, but this one isn't a problem because it's off-screen. Moving on. I don't have to go find it. I don't have to look at it. I know that this thing is off-screen. This one, I'll find it generally in the lower left. Okay. Freeform text search. So this is the filter area that's on every single one of these lists. And what this always does is it reduces this list using that filter. But there's nothing here. What we can do here is do a text search across the entirety of the system. It takes a second because it's a lot of XML to look through. And this shows me every place that the word warning appears. Sort those things, and I can look through. So you know what I want. Let's go do not release. Hopefully something shows up.
Funny watching your processor spike as soon as you're on that search. Yeah.
So this could be really good if you put some to-dos in some scripts that you're working on. For example, you could find your to-do tags.
Correct.
And then figure out what needs to get done still, what's unimplemented.
This is the way Todd does it. So Todd Geist will tag the word do not release into particular objects so that before he releases a new version of Auto or something like that, he can just run this search. And then it'll go back to the system, fix those, clean them up, do whatever he needs, and then export another DDR and bring it back in to confirm 100% that every single one of these was resolved. And there's all sorts of fun ways that you can hide these things in. This is a comment on a field. This is a text object on a layout. And these are script steps that are comments. And so there's all sorts of ways to kind of just tag this word, do not release, somewhere in there on a layout or whatever, so that you can know that you've resolved all your problems before you pass it on. Let's see here. Now, this section of the queries list they're marked as slow. It's because these have a tendency to either tackle large chunks of data or look across the entire system. So we've got unreferenced objects. Every time I talk about unreferenced objects, I have to momentarily talk about a blog post that's on the Geist Interactive site, because unreferenced does not mean unused. There are ways to reference things. For example, I could reference this layout using a go to layout with the layout number. It's a kind of indirection, and it's not a great way to write code, but that doesn't mean a customer didn't do it.
We could have web publishing that calls scripts and things.
Absolutely. External references, those kinds of things. And so be very careful about saying, oh, these objects are unreferenced, I'm just going to go ahead and kill them. You really need to understand the system that you're working with before you can make an intelligent decision about what objects are not used. Hang on just a second.
I'm just gonna power through, guys.
You're gonna hear sirens in a minute?
Sorry about that. My home security system has gotten a little flaky recently.
Just to make sure. This tells you these objects are unreferenced within the context of this file.
If it was a multi-file system and you were looking at all the files, it would tell you if they are referenced anywhere in the system.
Gotcha. Okay.
But it can't look to PHP code or AppleScript code or any other way of externally referencing. And it also can't handle indirection sources. So if you built the layout name in a calculation and then said, go to layout by name, I couldn't tell you about that. Now, what I can do is show you all the places in your system where you're using indirection. So we can say, are we doing go to layout by name? Yes, we are. We are doing it 3 places. The fact that these are doing variables, I might have to go and do some hunting to make sure that these things are just storing a name from where it was and then pulling it back out. If you're just storing the name and restoring it, then that will continue to work. But if these are somehow hard-coded or something like that, these go to layouts would break. And so these two can work together to give you more information, but it's still not enough to be able to say 100% I know that these are not being touched. So be cautious about using unreferenced objects to clean up your system. You can break it really quickly. Broken references, all the different, there were some field missings that we saw. There was some table occurrences that are not seeing things. This will find all of those. And it takes a second. So here's all of those. These are definite cruft. I'd love to clean those up. But we had a missing file. So the first thing that I would do is try and hunt down that file, because half to 3/4 of these might go away as soon as I actually had the rest of the system. Now here is a flattened list of every calculation string in the entire database. It takes a second because I think there's about 70,000 of them.
What does the slow in parentheses indicate?
It's just hint that this might take a couple seconds. People would click on tables and go, wow, this is fast. And then they'd come down here and click on this and go, oh, it must be broken. I also have customers who are using this with massive systems. I've got a 1 gigabyte DDR that I play with pretty regularly to do performance testing. And you throw a 1 gigabyte DDR at this, and the performance is still great, particularly for a 1 gigabyte DDR, but this calculations list might take 20, 30 seconds to bring up rather than 5. That is a spot where you'll see all of these spike, because in most of those multi-file things, I do multi-threading. So here's all the calculations. I was wrong about the 70,000. This one's just 13,000, 14,000 calculations. So I can look here and say, okay, here's a 28,000 character calculation. Sorry. Then again, this is in something that I got from somebody else. There's tons of text, and okay, that's fine. But in certain cases, I might look at that and go, yeah, no, I'm going to need to fix that. All comment. So have you ever seen that thing where, let's look at this one first. So this is a button. It's a hide condition. And here is the hide condition. Now, if you copy an object from one layout to another and the context changes such that this calculation can't get there anymore, FileMaker will very often say, oh, let me comment that out for you so it's not a problem. But it doesn't tell you. There are all sorts of ways you can tie an almost unlimited number of calculation strings to a single layout object. But it's not published anywhere when any of those break. And so I may have commented this out myself. But if I didn't, this might be something that I need to chase down. That gets the caution symbol. The stop sign is a different thing. This, again, is a hide condition. And in certain situations, if you, for example, if you're on a layout and you're in the hide condition field and you try and comment out that calculation, FileMaker goes, gosh, I don't know what this is. It doesn't seem to be a field reference. I'm going to make it a string. And so FileMaker actually wraps it in double quotes for you. So this one is all comment. This one is all comment that's been turned into a string. Now, here's where that gets really funky. To be completed as a string would be positive, but I commented the thing out because I don't want it to work. So if I comment this out, I should be a negative, which means it should never hide. But FileMaker then turned it into a string, which is always true, which means that this object is hiding. I actually reversed the logic on my calculation when I tried to comment it out. I tried to turn it off, and they turned it on. Very difficult to catch those and see why and where and how those things are happening. And so bringing that to your awareness is what that's for. Here are all of the disconnected calculations. And so this basically indicates you can't get there from here. Let me look at this one. So this is a tooltip on a layout. The starting table for the layout is in this T15 table occurrence group. It's just what the table occurrence name right there, T15 product. The thing is, in this system, I know that only things that have the same prefix are connected. This calculation is referencing T05. T05 and T15 aren't connected, which means this calculation is broken, but not in any way that generates an error or anything like that. If you're lucky, it fails and does nothing. If you're unlucky, it works in some bizarre way, generating completely unpredictable behavior and possibly a huge performance problem. This is a big problem when you're doing separate, disconnected chunks of table occurrences. If instead you're doing something like selector connector, where basically every table occurrence is connected to every other table occurrence. Sometimes if you move something from one area to another, it's going to start following a really weird calculation path that's too long. And so this is the this is the number of table occurrences that it has to touch outside of the one it started on. Okay, so this starts someplace and talks to 5 other table occurrences just to run the calculation. This is the max distance, which in this particular case is 2. But if I know my system and I know that none of those selector connector sequences went beyond 3 or 4, and I see an 8 here, then I know that I've got something that's following the wrong path. Yeah. So lots of stuff. This is a great place to come to look at performance issues and things like that. All the layout objects on the entire system. This is great. Anybody ever looked at one of those systems where somebody put 1 pixel by 1 pixel web viewers on layout so that they could do Google Analytics or something like that? It used to be an old FileMaker trick. And so here I can say web viewer. Here's all my web viewers. I can now flip through them and look at the width and the height and see how big they are. That's a 26 pixel by 26 pixel web viewer. Maybe something I want to look at some point. Flip down through. That one's bigger, smaller. And I can just see these things here. 45. So none of the single pixel things, but there's some pretty small web viewers in there. This is going to tell me something about how this system works on that kind of stuff. There is a top call stats log analyzer. That's a whole separate complicated discussion, so I'm not going to get into that. Last major thing to take a look at here is this report card. This report card is at the bottom of the list in the slow section because it's literally the slowest query in the entire system. And the reason is that it basically runs all the other queries and aggregates the data from them into one place that you can look at it. That'll take just a moment more. Crunch, crunch, crunch.
Yeah.
So the use case for this report card came from my time as a consultant. And so it's really built around giving you the most information I possibly can about the structure of this system and its complexity in the shortest period of time. And I was kind of thinking of it in the case of you're sitting down with a brand new customer in 5 minutes, and you got them to send you a DDR. How much data can I give you for walking into that meeting or that phone conference so that you can speak intelligently about how complicated adjustments or redevelopment of a system is going to be? And so we've got things like the table count, field count, number of serialized fields, number of indexed fields, calculations, stored and unstored. 50% of the calculations in this thing are unstored. That could potentially be a performance issue. That's something I'm going to look at if they're saying, hey, adding records to this thing is slow, or retrieving things is slow. This system uses lookups. Some people don't like lookups. They've moved entirely to auto entry calcs. Let's see here. Single step buttons. These are buttons that do something other than perform script. There's a case or two where you need to do that, but in a lot of cases, I can just click on that to drill in. Well, these are open URLs, a send mail. Even for some of these send mails, I'm going to want some validation and things like that on the data. I don't just want one single step. And so this would be something that I would take a look at. We were talking before about not being able to tell how a system is being talked to. And one of the things that we can look at for that is down here in extended privileges. So how do you find out if WebDirect is actually accessible on a particular system? Well, you need a privilege set that has the WebDirect extended privilege tied to it, and that privilege set has to be tied to at least one active account. Otherwise, you really don't have WebDirect. And so that's actually what this section right here does. 100% of active accounts have WebDirect access. But sitting down with the data and trying to come up with that, going through FileMaker's interface, is a nightmare. And so I note as I'm looking through here that this system has WebDirect, FileMaker remote access. There are no active accounts that have PHP access. We do have ODBC access, XML access, REST access. Depending upon the version of FileMaker you've got, we may or may not be able to do AppleScript and ActiveX connection. And all the accounts can run URL scripts. Boom, right there. This was one here that Todd requested. And it has to do with, we looked before at the list of global variables. There are 97 total global variables, including the number with inconsistent case. But those 97 global variables are actually stop doing that. Those 97 global variables actually touch 1,400 different places in the system. Okay, so there's calculations that use it, fields that use it, scripts that use it, that kind of thing. So I can look at this and say 4 fields talk to global variables, 395 scripts, 50% of the scripts reference a global variable somewhere in the script. And so what that immediately tells me is before I can edit any of the scripts in this system, I first need to understand what they're doing with global variables. And that's going to add to the complexity and the duration of any project that I try and do in here. So anyway, tons of great stuff here. There are mouse overs on basically all of these, describing what it is talking about and at least a little indication of why I think these numbers are important. I have added numbers to these lists based upon user requests. So if you've got something that you'd really like to know when you're looking at a system for the first time, let me know. Now, in FMPerception, I'm going to change gears a little bit real quick. We do have a Diff Engine that will compare 2 DDRs and tell you all the places that they've changed. But this was written 3 years ago before I really understood what it was that everybody would want from a diff. And it's very verbose. As an example, if you take a layout with 660 objects on it, select all the objects and move them all 1 pixel to the right, this thing will generate a message for every single one of those objects going, this object was moved 1 pixel to the right. This object was moved 1 pixel to the right. And that's just too much data for anybody to deal with. So I've started writing a new Diff Tool. And I'm going to show you that real quick. So this is it. And so I'm going to pick a real small file so we can see it quickly. Here's the modified version. And I can compare. Oh, really? Oh, there we go. It did do. So here is flagging every place where anything was added, anything was deleted, and anything was edited. So I can click on this and see, well, we deleted a table called posts and added a table called junk. So we can get much more granular information here. Because in a lot of cases, when you're dealing with FileMaker changes, you really need the 50,000-foot view. How many changes have occurred? Where did those changes occur? Not, please itemize for me the individual changes to this table or this layout. In a lot of cases, if a script changed, you don't care what changed in it. You're going to go to the old version, copy the contents, come over to the new version, and paste it in, and you're done. You know what I mean? So right now, this is displaying XML, but that's only because I haven't finished writing that section. We can see this thing was added, this thing was deleted. Here's a table occurrence. This one was edited. And again, I'm not going to expect anybody to look at this XML, but the trick is that this table was deleted. And so because the table is deleted, the new XML doesn't have a reference to the table anymore. I'm going to make that pretty for everybody so that it'll tell you exactly what happened. But this gives you really quick way to look at 50,000 foot, what happened here? What's going on? Yeah, so this is brand new. This is an alpha. It is not even in beta yet. My hope is to get it in beta by DevCon or very, very shortly thereafter.
Coming soon.
I'm sorry?
Coming soon.
Coming soon. The beta group will be open to everybody who's a licensed user of FMPerception. So I'll just use that large block of people that I've got and have them run crazy through it. And at least initially, for probably the first year, maybe 2, maybe 3, I don't know yet, the cost of this software will be included in FMPerception. So you buy one, you get both.
Cool.
So, because I've been promising my FMPerception people a new Diff Engine for a little while, and now finally ready to actually be able to get in there. The particular trick is this one uses the new V2 XML that FileMaker released in FileMaker 18. Dramatically changing the nature and style of the XML really messed up Diff engines. So, so this is FM comparison coming soon. So let me throw one more slide at you real quick, because it is the most common question that I get about FMPerception. And I could have sworn I had a slide for that. I don't. The most common question I get is, where do I really position this versus other tools in the space? And I look at the space as largely composed by 2 clusters of things. There's base elements, Inspector Pro, which are powerful DDR analysis tools. And I like those products. The thing is, I think that we've been using them trying to get them to act like FMPerception. And that's not what they're good at. If you've got a big 6-month system migration where you're going to be doing a ton of development and like turning a multi-file system into a single file system or vice versa, doing an analysis in one of those tools and then using their note-keeping abilities and things like that to really plot out your process, great move. But then I'm going to want FMPerception every single day while I'm doing that work, because the system is changing dramatically every day, sometimes just in a couple of hours. I don't know if anybody's ever had a really productive day where by lunchtime, a DDR that is 4 hours old is useless. And so there's that. On the other side, there is actually another cluster of tools that I put in this category, and that's things like the Monkey Bread software plugin and the way it alters the FileMaker interface, and also 2Empower FM's developer assistant. And these are tools that give you the ability to search things in FileMaker and in at least a couple of cases do finds and replaces. And those are really neat, and they're great because they're integrated directly into FileMaker. The problem is that they drive off of the clipboard. And so they're limited in the scope of the data that they've got. So those are very fast but have small scope. And the other tools are very slow but have large scope. And so what I'm looking for is a tool that is very fast but has the large scope. And that's FMPerception. And so within that realm, I don't even think of this as competing with the other products. It's filling in a gap that we never really had a tool to work with. I contacted Todd right before this, oh my goodness, where did it, there we go, Keynote. I had him set up a new discount code.
Cool.
So,
Heyo.
if you would like to pick up FMPerception, this is your code for at least the next couple of weeks. That'll get you 20% off. There is also a fully functional 14-day trial on the website. You can download it. You don't even have to give us your email address.
So what is the single user cost?
The single user cost is $4.99. That installs on up to 2 computers, so you can go desktop, laptop, Mac machine, Windows machine, Mac machine, VM, or honestly, it could be you and the person in the next cubicle. I'm not going to chase that sort of thing down. So that's $4.99 basically for the first year, and then that gets you that version and any version released in the next 12 months. And after that point, you can renew that support and continue getting all versions for the next 12 months for 50% of that list price. If you need more licenses, there are larger, or more machines, there are larger licenses. There is also a button right in the software to deactivate FMPerception from a particular machine, and then you can reuse that license on another machine. I know people who bump these things around. They've got 5 servers, and so they have 1 copy on their client machine and 1 copy that they just activate on each server when they need to do an analysis someplace remote. I'm fine with that.
Is real-time editing in the roadmap?
I'm sorry?
Real-time editing from FMPerception?
Okay. So there are huge sets of caveats for talking about this. The first is there is no way to edit FileMaker directly from inside FMPerception. And I don't see anything coming, at least as far as FileMaker has announced, that will allow it.
Okay.
Okay. The APIs are not there for me to send a command to FileMaker to change something. Now, on the long-term roadmap for FileMaker is using this new XML and allowing you to edit the XML and then turn the XML back into a database. Okay. That is on the roadmap, but that feature doesn't exist in FileMaker yet. Okay. And until it does, we won't be able to support it.
Cool.
And that's a relatively long term. To be perfectly honest, in the process of that, I'm going to be rewriting FMPerception from the ground up so that we can get there. Because that wasn't even a pipe dream when I first wrote FMPerception 3 years ago. So it needs a major architectural shift to be able to do that. So it is on the timeline. I have no idea when that's going to happen. It could take FileMaker to get to the point where they're ready to do it.
Hey, Dave. Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So you've clearly spent a ton of time diving into the file, like the XML, the DDR, and then probably the new save as XML script step. I'm kind of curious if you've gleaned any insights into FileMaker organization. I'm sort of wondering if there's any like Easter eggs or something that you found that really surprised you about how the XML was put together, something that wouldn't be obvious from the regular FileMaker point of view.
There's interesting stuff in the new XML in particular. I mean, most of the things that impress me about the old XML are the things that they missed. For example, the reason that you can't, when you copy and paste layout objects, the tab order of those layout objects doesn't come across. You notice that? It'll break your tab order every time you copy and paste layout objects. And the reason for that is that FileMaker just doesn't have any place in the XML for the layout object. That's in the old XML. The new XML does have it.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's, the one thing that the old XML has no awareness of is layout parts. I know how tall a layout is, but I don't even know how many layout parts there are on a layout. It's just not in the old XML. It is in the new XML.
You can't see like sub-summary sections or. Wow.
Nope. I can't tell you that the field is referenced in that sub-summary section. It's one of the things that's, one of the cautionary points on something being unreferenced. Now, granted, if you have a sub-summary section that talks to a particular field, then that field also needs to be referenced in a button that applies a sort or a script step that does a sort or whatever, and I'll find it in that sort definition. But I can't tell you that the field is referenced on a particular layout. Then again, most of the time when you have a sub-summary section, the field itself will be in the sub-summary section, and that would qualify as a reference.
Right.
In the new XML, probably one of the biggest surprises so far has been, where was it? I'm looking on my screen at the diff thing. In my head. Oh, yeah. So one of the things that isn't in the old XML is if you make one of those little note regions on your table occurrence graph and type some text into it, the old DDR has no idea that you've done that. Those are not exported in the DDR. The new one does. But what's weird is the tag that is used to describe those is a layout object. It basically treats those like throwing text on a FileMaker layout. I've got a tech support request that I want to send into them to say, can you please stop doing that? Because I really like all of my layout objects to be in the layouts part of the system.
Yeah, I agree. That can be confusing.
It makes my logic just a little bit harder, a little bit more complicated when they reuse those things. They did the same thing, and this is largely related to, I think, some of the stuff that they want to do with instantiating a database out of an XML file. Is in the old DDR, a script object has subnodes for the steps. In the new DDR, the script object is an independent little chunk. I can even show it to you.
Backing up just 1 second. So a note on the managed database screen will show up as a layout object. What layout does it? What layout does it say it's referencing?
It doesn't have those things. It's just a child layout object of the relationship graph. The relationship graph was a layout.
Right.
Where did scripts? So here is a script. Let me just take one of these delete ones. So here is, I'm sorry, I apparently clicked the wrong thing. Scripts, there were no changes in the scripts in that thing that I did. Okay, so I can't show it to you. But the point is, the script object is really just a header. It has the name of the script, the ID of the script, and how it appears, as far as does it run with full access privileges, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The script content is actually elsewhere, and it's, there we go, I think it's somewhere down here. I don't know. Sorry. They store all of the script content elsewhere in a completely different section of the XML that just references back to the original script.
Wow. So like each script step has the ID of the parent script?
No, it's as a bundle.
Okay.
So it's actually obnoxiously, it's a script reference object, and script references, if you have a button that runs a script, that has a script reference. But these steps also just reference the original script. So they're child objects ideologically, but not in the XML. They're entirely independent. Just there's some interesting choices that are being made. I know that at least some of those have to do with being able to handle these changes in the XML, so that you can take the XML and turn it back into a thing. Is that it needs to know about the existence of the script before it needs to know what the content of the script is. And so it doesn't want to have to go through the XML twice. It's going to do it once. And so the first time, it just basically creates all the scripts. And then it goes back through in a later pass and populates those.
Yeah.
But there's also the fact that this XML, I'm fairly certain, is going to be changing in all sorts of interesting ways. So we're just going to have to see what happens in 19 and stuff like that.
So we're going to get to wrapping things up here now.
Yep. I would say any other questions, or if anybody's done. Cool. If you have questions or problems, the easiest way to get a hold of us to answer those things is at support@geistinteractive.com. You can send us an email, and there's even a menu option for doing it in the help menu in FMPerception, so you can do it right from there.
Cool.
Very good.
Good job.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Dave. Yeah. Actually, one more quick question. How long have you been working on FMPerception? When did you start working on it?
So FMPerception came out in May of 3 years ago. I started working on it in like late October the previous year.
Okay. Okay.
The core functionality came through pretty quickly, but then there's just been hundreds of features that have been added since then.
Yeah.
What is it written in?
That's a fun one. So the only way to get that kind of performance is to do it in native code. Mm-hmm. So FMPerception on Mac is written in Swift, and on Windows, I rewrote it from the ground up in C# because I wasn't willing to sacrifice the performance. So it's about 25,000 lines of Swift and about 35,000 lines of C#. C# is a little more verbose, so it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right.
Thanks again, Dave.
Thank you very much. Okay. So just to wrap things up here, we will not be having a meeting next month because it's DevCon. And so I think the meeting falls, when we would have the meeting would fall during DevCon.
Right.
And I don't think people are going to want to do it as soon as we get back again too. So that's, well, the next one will be in the beginning of September. That's our schedule for that. Yep.
Cool.
All right. Thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks for that, Dave. And we'll see you. We'll see everyone in September.
See you, Dave.
Thanks.
Hey.
Bye.